Welcome to another edition of Searching for Sparks. I'm Tim Motzer, and today I'm excited to have Kavus Torabi on, the frontman for GONG. He's also a member of Cardiacs, and there's exciting news about that. So without further ado, let's bring on Kavus. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, great to be back.
And well lit, and you've had some adventures this week that I'm really excited to hear about, and that is that you played with the Cardiacs recently.
That's right. Yep, we were over in Barcelona playing a sort of, I suppose you might call it a fringe event, a part of Primavera Festival. Have you ever done Primavera?
No, but I know about it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I did it years ago with a band called Chrome Hoof I was playing with briefly, but yeah, we were in a venue in the city, just at the bottom of the Rambla, called the Apollo, and yeah, we were playing there on Wednesday, which was great. You know, sort of slightly condensed version of the set we were playing in March this year, and yeah, it was great. I think it's first time forever for Cardiacs. I mean, I think the classic, Tim Smith, Cardiacs never played in Spain. So it was our first time in Spain, and yeah, it was lovely. Yeah, it's really beautiful experience.
That's beautiful. And can you tell me a little bit about your history with the Cardiacs and how that all came together?
I mean, sort of, yeah. I mean, looking back, it all sort of seems inevitable. I got turned on to the group in 1988 when I was 16, and it was exactly what I needed. I didn't know I couldn't have imagined music like that. So I didn't know it was what I'd been looking for, but it was exactly what I'd been looking for. I've never heard anything like it. Or I'd heard the closest, in fact, I'd heard to it. The only point of reference I had was another British group called Madness. And specifically, there was an album they made around, I think, sort of 1982 called Rise and Fall. And the album I heard in 1988 of Cardiacs that had just come out was called A Little Man in a House and a Whole World Window. A guy I knew turned me onto it, just said, look, you've got to borrow this. I think it'll be right up your street. It didn't look like it was going to be up my street at all, but God, before the first side was out, it was the best music I'd ever heard,
Wow.
But when you get into a band and it's like your favorite band and you have to find out everything about them and you have to join the fan club, or at least I did, and you have to buy all the different versions of the record and know all the lineups and just kind of enter that world and paint it on your leather jacket and your bag and talk about them all the time. I mean, Cardiacs had that. I mean, it still has that effect on people. But that was the last time I had a kind of favorite band in that sense. I think the next thing after that I got into that was like, well, this is now my favorite band, was like Henry Cow or XTC or something. But that was more just wanting to get everything in here. It was, it was the last vestige of that kind of teenage fandom. I was at the age, 16, where I was able to sort of go to gigs by myself, and I used to hitchhike around to see Cardiacs around the UK whenever I could.
Wow.
And one thing I sort of became aware of, as well as seeing Cardiacs, and I sort of met Tim Smith a couple of times just to sort of chat to before gigs, so he kind of knew who I was. But I think the thing that sort of struck me, certainly coming up to see them in London, was that there seemed to be this kind of in the early 90s, and there seemed to be like this scene. I don't want to call it a scene exactly, but this like coterie of bands like around them. And they're all pretty interesting. There was a band called Levitation that he had produced. I mean, Tim had produced a lot of these bands. There was another band called City Busai, who were brilliant. And then there were some other bands in London that probably didn't get to be so well known, like Walk on Water was one, and a few others. And these were like sort of friends of Tim's as well. And I just sort of thought, well, this seems to be this seems to be quite a groovy scene going on here.
Right.
And I was making music in Plymouth and certainly started to lean more. I'd had my anchor in metal. Was always interested in so it's more expansive stuff, or rather, what was possible with stretching metal out. But once you take your anchor up from metal, as long as your anchor's in metal, you can get as wigged out as you like. You can be Voivod, who are like the metal cardiacs, or you could be like Watchtower, who are this kind of proto kind of math prog, whatever metal. You could be any of that, but as long as there's an anchor there for a metaler to recognize it, metalers will get on board. But the minute, I'm going to see how far I can stretch this analogy, the minute you pull the anchor up and you're no longer in the kind of the silt of metal, then you really are all at sea. And it's like, well, what are you? Who are you? And so, we kind of, I was in a band in Plymouth, it was like my teenage band was called Die Laughing, or, as we pronounce it then, Die Laughing, because we're from Plymouth. And, we were trying to stretch this thing up. We were getting into, as I say, Voivod, Coroner and Celtic Frost and whatever was going on, Bolt Thrower and Slayer, but also really into like Hawkwind and Cardiacs and Fields of the Nephilim and, whatever, and Osric Tentacles and Gong, and so we started putting that into the mix. And then me and Dan, the other guy in the band, Dan Chudley, formed a new band called the Monsoon Bassoon. And we kind of realized, well, I think that, the place to be is London. If we're really serious about this, which we were, we really, really want to give our music, the best possible sort of chance it can have to be heard by the right people. And London just seemed to be the place because of what was going on with Cardiac. So it's interesting because we moved to London around a similar-ish sort of time that I suppose the, I don't like the term, but that kind of Britpop thing was happening. And it's like we had this whole adjacent little scene like away from the music press, but in the same little part of London, Camden, all the gigs were taking place, but there was this whole other little thing going on where instead of, a few thousand groovers, it was, maybe 50 to 200 groovers at these gigs.
Yeah.
And we sort of, so I moved up there and, got very friendly with Tim. And, as a result of, I started working for him as guitar tech. I mean, I'd never guitar teched in my life, but I bumped into one of the guys that worked for him that I recognized, a guy called Captain John, in a pub near where I lived. And, we had a few drinks together. I just kind of, as is my way, because you got to hustle, right? It's all about the hustle. I just sort of said, oh, well, if Cardiacs ever needs a guitar tech, I'm the man, and gave him my number. Now, I'd never guitar teched in my life. Right? I could change strings. I knew which way the signal chain. Okay, guitar, pedals, amp, or whatever. But I'd never done that. And then I was at college.
Best way to learn.
Yeah, exactly. I was at college studying like just this part-time sort of music technology course. I came home one day, and my girlfriend said, "You're not going to believe it. Tim Smith just rang up." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They're going on tour and they want a guitar tech. And I was like, read. And I rang him up and I got his mum because his studio was down at his mum's place, Eileen. I said, "Hi, is that really nervous? Hi, is Tim there?" She said, "No, he's going to have a meeting about his record," which turned out to be a meeting about his record. And it turned out to be Sing to God. So I, there it was. And I went down and, I got on the bus and I never got off. And I was, and it turned out Tim was never really bothered about, whether people, like an actual proper guitar tech. He just wanted people he had a good vibe about. And he'd seen my band, the Monsoon Bassoon, and we chatted a little bit afterwards. So I knew he liked my band. And then that was it. We sort of, it sounds corny, but I got on with him. We got on with each other straight away, and
there it is.
By the end of the tour, it was really, really close. Liked all the same music and had a very similar attitude towards life and everything, really. And then I did that for a few years. From that was around, I suppose, I can't remember when the tour was. It was supporting Chumbawamba. It was either 95, maybe, somewhere around that. And I did the next few, the next few years. And then I was finally demoted to guitarist, which is I took a pay cut to sort of move like 3 meters from where I was onto the stage because the the crew got paid more than the band, you know.
Of course.
It's a standard. Still is the case. Actually, still is the case with Cardiacs, because we didn't get we lost money on the recent Barcelona gig, but and you know, so it was kind of inevitable, I suppose.
Yeah, and it had to be like a huge thrill for you, right? Like helping Tim out and doing the tech work and being like up front and close. I have friends that have done that, like tech for their favorite drummers, and the next thing you know, they're the drummer in the band. Yeah,
it's a standard course. I was doing we only really had two crew, like in that on the stage. It was like Captain John and myself, and I was doing the smoke machines as well. We had do you know what, Cardiacs used to do this thing with smoke machines. I've never seen or smoke machine singular. I've never seen anyone else do it, and I kind of got really into this kind of. I kind of took it to the next level. But we had these two massive, like, industrial fans, and a smoke machine. And what I would do is I would point the fan. I mean, they're really big, like heavy, full-on fans. And we'd have one at either side of the stage, and I would point them so they met about, 2 or 3 foot above Tim's head. And they didn't, to have the switches, I just have a long cable, and I just have 2 plugs, or I can't remember if I just use switches to turn them on and off on a plug board.
Yeah.
But basically, there were different things you could do. Like when an epic bit would come in a song, I'd turn the fan on and hit the smoke machine. And it was like the tempest you'd get, because the smoke in 1 second would fire up to the middle and meet the other jet and sort of fire all over the stage. So you'd have this quite gentle song. And as soon as it rocked out, there was just this miasma of swirling smoke everywhere. You stop it and it would dissipate. Whereas other times I'd do things like I'd turn the fans on, I'd turn the fans on, then switch them off again. And as they were slowing down, do a few puffs of smoke. So you just get this little wisps, and you could get really quite creative with the smoke machine. So I really love doing that. And I gave the guy that took over from me, who was a pal, Tom, I gave him a good masterclass before I joined. Look, this is what I do with the smoke machines. This is how we do it. But I've never seen other bands do it, in that way before. It was really fun.
It's usually like a waterfall off the front of the stage or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So that was me and Cardiacs up until 2008, when Tim, had his. Well, I discovered him actually, or died for 4 minutes and came back again, and the whole world for me and everyone around has changed from that point onwards.
Wow.
And I'm still living in this sort of post-Tim world. I mean, he actually died in 2020. Mm-hmm. But this felt like he kind of died. He was there, but it was a half-life, and it changed. It sort of changed everything around him, because he was so magnetic, and so sort of charming, and not without his faults, but because he knew how magnetic and charming he was, and that therein lies the making of a cult leader, But
he lived this life, right?
He lived a life, with an amazing friend, and you realise that he was quite this benign character. He wasn't this big, ostentatious. Listen to me. He was this very gentle, hippie-ish, sort of sweet, guy off stage.
Would you go as far as saying he was a mentor to you?
Oh God, yeah, God, in so many ways,
yeah,
in so many ways, but. That you realize that he was this sort of planet around which this whole group of people orbited, but when the planet goes, then the whole scene kind of went odd, and there were people banging into each other, and no one really knew. We didn't, it's been a strange trip since 2008 when he went down.
It's interesting like that when what keeps scenes together. And like I remember in Philly, we used to have a club. It was a pub. You would call it a pub, I guess, but it was a club. And the first time I went there, Sun Ra Orchestra was playing in this place.
What was it called, by the way?
It was called Tritone.
Okay, great name.
Yeah, and the Tritone was a meeting place for everything, for jazz, for punk, for avant-garde.
Yeah.
You name it, people were in there playing. And it felt like a living room, a little bitty stage. And when I saw Sun Ra in there, it was like they were spilling off of the stage into the room where the seats were. It was just unbelievable.
What year was this when you saw Sun Ra?
Well, he was passed by that point, but
Oh, so it's the Marshall Allen.
yeah, Marshall
Oh,
Allen's
yes, which is
orchestra,
amazing.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
and is still going, and it just blew me away. And that place just brought everybody together. It became the center of a scene, and at some point the place got sold, and suddenly everybody went flying off. There was never a center again in Philly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's wild how that happens. It was such a creative center, and it
And,
was
and you
easy.
and you always take it for granted. You
Yeah,
always just think, well, this is. I mean, not it's brilliant,
yeah,
but you
and
just
it, and
think,
it
well,
was
this is how things are now.
yeah, and it was easy at the time. You would call, and they would be like, "Yeah, when do you want to play? July? Okay, I have these dates. Great, done." And it was that simple, And now it's like there's so many gatekeepers and people that are curating their vision, and it's hard to even find the stage sometimes.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
way it is.
yeah,
That's maybe a talking point about where we are today.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I hear you, man. I mean, and it's so and it so quickly goes. I mean, my world changed in one day, and you
Yeah.
never know which day it is you're gonna. Some days I just can't remember, even recent days.
But
But
go
there's
ahead.
a day I'll take to the grave with me from the moment. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I will take every moment of that day that in June when I found Tim and just what happened
Yeah.
from the beginning to the end. I will take every detail of that
Yeah.
day and how it played out to the grave with me. It's you never know which day you're going to get, and the thing
Yeah.
is, I've been thinking this recently. While you're going through anything, be it something, maybe if it's something ecstatic, it's different. But while you're dealing with anything that's pretty high intensity, and what turns out to be, traumatic, I think as you're going through it, you're just dealing with it. You're just dealing with the events as they come at you. The
Yeah.
events are coming at you, and you're dealing with them. It's really only days and months and years later you kind of realize how much that day changed you and how traumatic or how altering to your life it was. It's not at the time. It's after looking back, oh my God, what happened? What did we live through? At any given point, I wonder if anyone sort of experiencing a kind of under some like dictatorial regime or whatever. I mean, you do hear about people who say they missed the war. You'd hear. I mean, we don't have too many people alive now that experienced the war, and obviously UK being very different to America because we got bombed, or the country got bombed. But you'll hear people say, "Oh, well, I kind of missed the rationing. I missed the sense of community." It's strange, right? But
Aspects of it.
yeah,
It brought people together.
yeah.
And it's like I guess you would look at that as a beautiful life chapter. It's a chapter in your life that is a real high point, and so much learning happens. And as we get older and stuff, I still look back at different things, and it's like I'm still still reflecting on moments in life that were critical, life changing. And then you see them differently as you get older too. Like, wow, how great was that? That moment in time.
Yeah.
So, Tim sounds like a cool dude. Yeah,
No, he was great. He was wonderful. And I feel I was blessed to spend that period of time, between whenever it was 95 to 2008, in his company a great deal of time. But by the time I was in the band, we were on the phone with each other every day. But I had a room at his house, and I feel very, very lucky at the time. Particularly sort of, and it's such a corny thing to say, pre-social media or whatever. At the time, it was cool, but Cardiacs, it's not that they couldn't get arrested, but it was they were doing better than my band beforehand. But it was like Cardiacs were still playing a lot of the same venues that my band had been doing to a few more people, and we still had it still felt like this cultish thing. It's only really looking back on it and how big of a deal and how big of a I don't want to say cultural impact, but how much his music and how much what he did is seeping into culture or whatever, and how much, you know, you're seeing younger people get into this stuff, and to get, you know, for him to start getting props, or for the music of Cardiacs to start getting props from actually sort of well-known people. I mean, Dave Grohl did a 2-page article about them in Classic Rock. You know, you've got people, you know, people who I really look up to, like Jim Thirlwell, you know, Fetus, and Chewy, you know, Daniel Mongrain from Voivod. They're all, you know, Shane from Napalm, all big, you know, huge Cardiacs fans. And it's a funny thing. Tim got given a doctorate about a year or so before he died.
Wow. And
we always knew that the little coterie, the little swathe of people around him, is his really close friends. You know, we always knew one day, you know, to us he was like a William Blake figure. You know, one day people will get it. You know, one day people will get it, because the music press was awful, absolutely awful to the band.
Wow.
And the British music press was especially savage anyway. That was their kind of thing. But they hated Cardiacs.
Wow.
And absolutely hated the band. And if I could just prattle on a little bit more.
Sure.
I remember when I heard them, before I knew about any of this kind of neurodivergent stuff, or you know, weird music taste, or that I was really into this pretty like information packed music. Before I realized that wasn't what everybody was into, I remember hearing that Cardiacs album, Little Man in a House, and then in '89, you know, On Landing in the Sea, and then, you know, the music press at the time was very big on you know, the Stone Roses, and this is no slight on the Stone Roses. I thought it was a nice record, that first one, you know. But I just thought when I heard Cardiacs, because it was the best music I'd ever heard. It was the most beautifully constructed, but it had this otherworldly quality. And I just thought, well, it's only a matter of 6 months, and they're the biggest band in the country, you know.
Yeah. And
I was shocked when you'd read reviews of the album, 0 out of 10 in whatever it was, you know. And Tim was heartbroken. You know, they hated Cardiacs, I mean, you know, I could give so many examples of, but I won't go down, because I'm not here to bitch or to grind, you know, to sort of.
But it just goes to show you when it's a new idea and something really fresh, that people don't always get it, and especially journalists don't want to take it on because they're into what they're into. You know,
let's put a flag in it, because I've got a theory about that. But where it came from, so we always knew that, well, you know, it's coming. Tim's genius will be recognized. And of course it comes from academia. And Tim never sought that at all. I mean, this is the guy that taught himself to write music by buying the music to the Who's Quadrophenia and reading it along. And that's how he learned to read and write music.
That's a nice story.
Yeah, self-taught completely. But
I love that.
But of course, it comes from academia, and so he was made Dr. Smith by the end of his life. It was something he probably wouldn't have really cared for, but I think it was just beautiful that he got this from the Edinburgh Conservatoire, and he was so, you know, his condition meant he couldn't go up to Edinburgh to receive it. So Jim, his brother, received his doctorate on his behalf, but then we hired a hall in Salisbury near where he lived, and had someone from the Conservatoire came down, and we redid the ceremony there in front of his friends. And Bill Drake played some piano. I gave a little talk, and you know, and Tim was there on the stage in his wheelchair. But the bit that got me was, you know, the guy from the Conservatoire said it is the duty of the Conservatoire to recognise genius. And God, I'm choking up saying it. There's the duty of the Conservatoire to recognise genius, and that's what we're doing. And it was like, oh man, just validation for years of having this guy, who carried on despite being the hatred of the press.
Wow.
But it's on YouTube. The whole thing is on YouTube.
I'll check that out
Yes,
for
it's pretty
sure.
amazing. Yeah.
How did it feel playing the music this past weekend again?
I mean, great. We've done 4 shows earlier in the year. I mean, it's strange because yes, it's Cardiac's in name, but it's not Cardiac's. We're playing this. We finished off the record, which may sound controversial, but we finished off the record that Tim, Bob, and I had started. Bob got the drums down, and Tim and I worked up all the arrangements. But he went down before we, while we were making it, before he finished the vocals, and it sat there for 10 years because, or 12 years, because the plan was that we'll wait for Tim to get better or better enough to come back home, and he can produce it with a different singer. So everything's sat where it was, and we didn't progress it. I was listening to it all the time, and Tim and I would listen to it together, the desk mixes. But then, and right at the end of his life, our friend Craig Fortnum from his own project, it's called North Sea Radio Orchestra, he's a brilliant composer, arranger, said to Tim, how about I do some arrangements, brass and string arrangements for the album, just get things moving, and sort out the lyrics, and Craig Reed, so all the melodies had been scored, so Craig got all, Craig sorted all that out. Now, normally Tim would score all his own arrangements, but in this case, he gave Craig the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Craig did these arrangements and played the MIDI parts to Tim, and Tim would pick him up on some and say, no, not that bit. Yeah, yes to this, give him the thumbs up. Wow. So Tim had approved of all the arrangements, and that's how we. That's how we started off. He never got to hear the actual finished arrangements, and we continued the album with Jim at the helm, which was lovely, as sort of executive producer. Once after Tim had died, and I think it was a lovely way for Jim to reconnect with his brother, because Jim had always been fairly hands off with the records. He'd never really been an active part of making the records. It was really Tim and whoever his sort of right hand guy was, whether it was Bill Drake or John Paul, or for this record me, but then Jim got to get behind the desk, and what was lovely is that even though I was sort of involved in some a lot of the production ideas, having Jim as the sort of the buck stop with him meant that I could suggest something that I thought was a great idea, and Jim would go, no, I don't think so. And it's like, okay, all right, fine. So I don't have to feel like it's resting on my shoulders. It was almost like I really felt otherwise I'd feel the pressure of, Kavus Torabi came in and he turned it into his record, that kind of thing. But having Jim going, yeah, that's a great idea, or no, meant that it was like, okay, he's the executive producer, sort of thing.
I think a sounding board is so great. I really appreciate having someone like that when you're making a record, whether it's executive producer or just your mates, that's on or that's not on,
Yeah, well, Tim used to be my guy. I'd always send him my mixes or my record or whatever. How's this sound,
Oh, yeah.
And then he's like, oh, no, I turned the hi-hat down in that one, that sort of thing. But that kind of thing, yeah. So basically, we finished this album with help of Tim's friends, and then it was like, well, we got to tour this, right? So we had these shows, but it was actually the only. We probably would have done more shows, but it was this one window where Mike Van Aert and myself could both do it because we're both pretty busy, and in a way, it's like this Cardiacs thing sort of came round, and I was kind of not expecting it. It was. So I had to kind of very quickly find a place in my diary for it, and it kind of threw everything up sort of in the air a bit. But no, it's been amazing, and the response has been absolutely, brilliant. And it's not to talk smack on it anyway, say, oh, it's not Cardi, but the experience of being in it feels very different outside of that stage than it did to sort of when when I was doing the band with Tim. But I feel like we're, just got such a brilliant band, and I kind of feel like, or at least I hope that we are presenting this thing with like the attitude that the band was going in, that we had when I was doing the band and we were touring in 2007. This is kind of feels, based on what Tim and I we'd be talking about and stuff, it feels like that's how we would have done it anyway, So
that's nice. When did the album actually get released?
That was September last year.
Okay, so fairly recently.
Yeah.
Will you do more with Cardiacs, do you think?
We got one more show at a really good festival in the UK called Arctangent, and then I'll let's see what happens after that. That's all that's in the book at the moment. I mean, I don't know, because I'm kind of 20 years on from that now, and I'm where I'm at is I'm kind of where I'm at is somewhere different, and I'm curiously, and I'm able to pay my rent and put bread on the table with my own music, and that's kind of really where my loyalties are. Absolutely. At the moment. But I mean, I'm obviously never say never. It's like the response to this was amazing,
Yeah, I do want to get to your own music, but I know that we also want to talk about Gong a little bit. Mm-hmm. And
well, that's kind of both.
Yeah.
Now, yeah,
it's kind of out of Cardiacs. And at what point did Gong show up for you in your life? I know you were already a fan of Gong.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, who gets to join two of their favorite bands? It's pretty insane. Well, and Tim was a huge Gong fan as well. So when Cardiacs ended in 2008, I was all at sea, because I'd gone from writing songs with Dan Chudley in Monsoons, where we were. It was like a kind of, I don't know another songwriting relationship like it. A friend of ours in Plymouth used to say it was one brain, four hands. And I've never known a songwriting relationship like the one I had with Dan. I don't know how Walter Becker and Don Fagen worked, but it definitely wasn't a Lennon McCartney thing. It was this kind of this strange symbiotic thing. And so that had ended, and then I just put a lozenge in my mouth and I realized it's anyway. That had ended, and I did some stuff with Dan for a couple of years after that, and then I joined Cardiacs, and then it was like Tim was making it clear as we got further into it that he'd like to share the load with songwriting, and didn't know quite what that meant. I wrote bits and pieces on LSD, but we never actually kind of sat down and worked on a brand new song together. But he said that's what he'd like to do more of, and so I thought, well, great, I've got another songwriting partner. But then after Cardiacs was over, I found myself for the first time since I was a teenager sort of writing songs by myself, and without wanting to sound at all sort of, I don't know, macabre or whatever, in a strange way, like Tim going down kind of set me free a bit, because I would have been that guy's bitch till I died. I loved him so much, and he was so inspirational. I would have been happy being like his second in command sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, I say that, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have been really frustrated, but at least I felt at that time that I would have been. But I felt all at sea. My friend Dan had moved back to Plymouth. I was in London, and so I put together this band, Knife World. I'd been making this record, and I put this out and put together a band to perform it. And that, for the next few years, became my band. And what it taught me, it was running a large band, because we turned into an octet. We had a 3-piece horn section.
Awesome.
And I was composing for this big octet, which was voice and guitar, Melanie Woods on voice. And then we had, like I said, the 3 horn players, and then we had a drummer, a bass player, and a keyboard player. So I was writing for all of this, and I loved it. I loved writing for this big ensemble. And I think one thing that freed that up is Cubase. Being able to have something that I could do that on. I could make, because I don't read or write music, but I hear everything.
Yeah, you could write it with your DAW.
Mm. So the way I would teach parts, usually I'd say to Chloe, or we had Josh, Chloe, and Ollie, the horn section. I go, okay, this is how the tenor sax goes, and play it, and this is how the bassoon goes, and this is how the alto sax goes, and then they'd start playing it, and then between them, because they're proper horn players, they go, yeah, this part would probably sound better on the bassoon, and they'd make the arrangement better between them.
Yes,
and similarly, I'd say to Emmett, well, this is the keyboard part. This is how I'm hearing it. But if you can improve on that, great. But I know this works, sort of thing. So that's kind of how it worked. And that was that's what I was doing. And for the first time, I was fronting a band by myself. I was standing in the middle, and I lacked any real confidence as a vocalist.
Mm.
And I had to develop a thick skin to this day, because I know my voice is not for everyone, and I have to keep sort of, not that in any way I would compare myself to, Robert Wyatt or, I don't know, Joey Ramone, two of my favorite singers. But I have to sort of remind myself, well, they're not for everyone, But I kind of had to, I don't want to say fail in public, but I had to go up there and be lead singer. I mean, in the Monsoons, I was just one of three singers. And of the three of us, I was the George Harrison. I only had a couple of tunes, or maybe even the Ringo, But
right.
So I had to be a lead singer. And I think that gave me confidence and to perform. So, around the time of, we were about three albums in with Knife World, and I met David Allen. And I was presenting a small radio show with a guy called Steve Davis, who I now play in Utopia Strong with. And we had David Allen on as a guest. And, we after the show, we just really, really bonded. And I'd, never sort of met him before. And he was so kind. And he said, hey, man, you're a poet, man. And, we swapped numbers. And we would exchange each other. If he was in town, like Gong were in town, I'd come along to see him. This went on for about a year or so.
How cool was that?
Incredibly cool, And
Amazing.
then he was playing, and this brings it back to the Sun Ra Orchestra. He was playing with Marshall Allen.
Right.
David Allen and Marshall Allen were doing this improv thing, but it was put together by another artist whose name I don't remember.
Was that in London?
It was in London, in Cafe Otto, which was
20
minutes walk from where I used to live in Hackney for like 20 years. And David had never met Marshall Allen, but they were playing together.
Wow.
And I already had a ticket, but he texted me anyway saying, hey, are you going to come down to this gig? I'd love to see it. So I got down there pretty early, and I don't want to sound like, well, God, I mean, Gong, I can sound mystical, but I knew he was going to say what he said. From the moment I got there was this funny energy about him. He was sort of dancing from one foot to another. He seemed a bit nervous. And he said, so Kavus, man, I can't do an Australian accent. I certainly can't do his gentle Australian.
Yeah.
So Kavus, man, I think, I think you should be the guitar player in Gong. And I kind of knew he was going to ask that. And he said, man, I want someone who's going to bring fire. Oh, I said, I want someone who's going to bring fire. I think you're going to bring fire. And I said, well, David, you've never heard me play. He said, I don't need to hear you play. I never heard Mike Howlett play. I never heard Pierre Moulin play. You're the guy. And I said, David, I can't play like Steve Hillage. He said, I'm not interested in what you can't do. I'm interested in what you can do.
Oh, I love that.
It was like, wow, wowee. So that was what a line,
Wowee for sure. Yeah.
Now the thing is, and apologies for anyone who's watching this, who's heard this anecdote before, but if you haven't, I think it sort of bears repeating. Throughout my life, Gong has the best riffs, whether David wrote them or whether Steve Hillage wrote them. I love those angular, triangular shape. You know the one. You know what I'm talking about. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Gong has the best riffs. And throughout my life, I've been writing riffs that sound like gong, and sometimes too much like gong. And I'd go, too gongy, but just listen to any of my pre-gong work you can hear, especially in Knife World and the Monsoon Bassoon, these very gongish riffs. And I'm always early. I'm the most punctual man in rock. And so the first rehearsal we were going to have together was down in New Cross in London. And I got down there early and came up with this riff. And David and Dave Sturt came in, and straight away I was just playing this riff, and David jumped in and picked up a mic or whatever and started scatting along. And, that riff became a gong track called When God Shakes Hands with the Devil. And it was amazing. Wow, David likes my riff, and
wow, big moment.
And afterwards he said, "Hey man, great riff. Got any more?" I said, "Yeah, fucking hundreds." And it was like, finally all these like riffs that were too gong I could get to use. I don't think I ended up using any of them, but
you were preparing for gong for a long time.
Yeah. And I remember telling a couple of people, when I told people, "Oh, you're never going to guess what? I've joined gong," and people were just like, "Of course you have." It was almost as if they knew that was coming, sort of thing,
That's amazing. It's so amazing.
Yeah. And again, God, and that was I didn't obviously, I thought, well, I mean, David was like, I suppose he was probably like 72, 73 at the time. And I was like, I don't know, 40 or whatever it was I was. I just thought, here's a guy the same age as my dad, but he's just got this extraordinary energy, and
it's amazing.
He's really rooted in the now. He didn't seem, I mean, I love my dad, but he's, he's a man of his era, he's a man of his age, where he came from, his attitudes. But David seemed so in the present and completely, incredibly sane, incredibly switched on, very, very bright, very intuitive, not nearly this kind of goofy, kind of stoned, not that there's anything wrong, as a goofy stoned guy myself, not that there's anything wrong with that, but not anything like this kind of hippy dippy idea that people probably, think of. But what happened was we had this big tour booked to promote the album I See You, and David had slipped over and broken his arm.
Oh wow!
And he said, "Look, I'm only going to be able to play glissando guitar, so you and Fabio take care of guitar." But while he was in there having his arm looked at, they looked at something and they found a cancer. And it became clear that he wasn't going to be able to tour until this cancer got fixed. And once the agents and promoters and everything heard that David wouldn't be doing it, that it would just be this band of the latest incarnation of gong. I think there was maybe 47 gigs or something. I can't remember what it was. And I think all but 11 or something got cancelled.
Right.
There were 11 left to do. And we had a new album out. And David said, "You got to do them. You got to." And I didn't want to do it. I just thought this is bogus. And he's like, I sang for most of them. I think Dave sang one song, Syllaba, but I sang most of them. We got a new drummer in, Cheb Nettles, a guy I knew, who's the best drummer I'd ever played with. So I said, "Look, I know the guy." Because Orlando was in Australia and dealing with his dad's illness, and his mum, Chili, who was really ill as well. It just wasn't worth our while getting him over for like 11 shows. So we got this Cheb, as I said, the best drummer I've ever played with. And we started rehearsing, and actually it sounded great. Cheb was just the right man for the job. And a great drummer makes everybody play better. A rising tide raises all ships, and the right drummer, you play better as a musician with the right drummer.
Absolutely.
And we did these shows, and we were sending David video and live recordings, and he realized at one point that he would need another round of treatment for this cancer, and he was just said, "I'm done. I'm a firm believer in what will be will be." And as an aside, a wonderful thing about David's death, and there's a video of him even a week before reading poetry on YouTube. But what a wonderful thing about David's death is that he approached it with his arms open. He walked into it and greeted death like a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And David is someone who, if you ever told him that someone he knew had died, he'd go, "Yes, hooray, they're free." So he was someone, it's shot through all of his work.
Wow.
And that was always something that really attracted me, because I've been obsessed with death and trying to sort of, and finally succeeding with making my peace with mortality, and so it was so wonderful that he embraced death like that, because if he didn't, I think it would undermine all his work. It was like he meant it. But before he died, we had a couple of Zooms. And he sent us this email saying, "I am convinced that this version of Gong must carry on after I've gone. That Kavus has got to front it, and that I want you, that you should take this band. I never saw Gong ending with me, and you should take this band off, take it to places I could never have imagined." Or I'm paraphrasing. You could probably find it. The email's been published. You can probably find it online.
Amazing.
Now, I thought this was I just couldn't see it working.
Pretty daunting, right?
Yeah, I couldn't see it working. A band with no original members. But he had asked us to do this. And so then it becomes a binary choice. Either we do it or we don't do it. And if we do it, then we've got to do it. We've got to put everything into it. We've got to put ourselves, sort of completely into this thing.
Yeah.
And the label, Snapper, that had put out, and later Kscope had put out the album with David, said, "Well, we'd be up for an album."
There
so
you go.
The first thing that happened is, well, can we write songs together? Can we do this? As it turns out, Jeb is an extraordinary songwriter, as well, and a brilliant arranger. And as it turned out, we Fabio's a songwriter, and Ian and Dave, we'd all written stuff. And as it turned out, we kind of got an album over the line, and we toured it, and I could. And there was this no David, no Gong contingent, and that's inevitable, For me, no Ozzy, no Sabbath, It's the I get it, but it kind of it landed, and it felt like, at least I feel that we're very sincere about what we do. Four studio albums in now. We're completely sincere about this.
Absolutely.
And I know there are aspects about what we do that are not for some people. I know it needs a feminine presence, and it comes down to economics. I know some people are saying, "Oh, well, there's no synthesizer." But it's like, well, we're not trying to replicate classic Gong. We're not continuing the story of Zero the Hero. We're not doing any of that. What we are is we're doing what David said. Now, I'm an artist, and I would not. It was never my intention to be part of a tribute band or a covers band. And although we were, at the beginning of when we were doing this, we were doing like a few of our songs, like a few songs that we'd written with David.
Yeah.
Songs from our new album, and then stuff that we really loved of the canon, the old Gong.
Absolutely.
As we got further and further in and got more of our songs started taking over, because we inhabited those songs. I remember what the decisions I made about those lyrics. As much as I love singing the lyrics to "I Never Glid Before," I wasn't there when they were written. I don't know what the in-jokes really meant to David and Steve. I don't know what the atmosphere was when those songs were created. When we played, "My Sawtooth Wake" or something, I remember everything about writing that song. I remember how that song came together, and then we can take liberties with those songs. We can play them, we can improve them, and not feel like we're we're like standing on the toes or casting judgment on, on the previous stuff. I would never seek to try and improve old Gong stuff, but we can do that with our stuff,
But it's really interesting for me as a Gong fan and a Hillage fan and all this stuff. As I look back and think how I see Gong is it's many iterations and many chapters of that band. Even like an album like Gong Shamal, that's a unique record, and it was always kind of changing the guard here and there. And I was lucky enough, I'm not sure what year this was, but it might have been the last tour that they did of the US, although it might have been very small. But there was a festival called Nearfest.
Oh, I played Nearfest. Yeah.
And David was there, and Mike Howlett played bass. Yep. And so it was that version. Steve Hillage was in the band. Yep. And I was lucky enough to see that. That was the only time I got to see David. And he was strolling around the grounds and hanging out. And so I got to get a sense of him and Jilly, and what a band. And Mike Howlett was just the greatest dude, and got to hang with Steve for a minute, who has been a hero since Motivation Radio.
Yeah.
So, I get a real sense of what you're saying, but I guess what all that to say is, like, I think what you're doing is fantastic, because it's just a continuation of the idea of what Gong is, right?
Well, we were very fortunate because Gong does have previous. Gong has previous in this. Like you say, Shamal is a very different lineup to Camembert Electric and to Flying Teapot, but then also Pierre Merlin took it into the fusion direction, and David said, well, I wasn't a fan of that, but it's still Gong. So there was previous. It wasn't as if we were doing in Gong's history something completely new, but I don't know of any other band that does this. And as I say, I don't want to get overly defensive, but I know there is a contingent that wishes we would be doing more older stuff, and I get it, but we just play this stuff much better, because if you come and see us now, you get to see this stuff played by the people who wrote it and arranged it, rather than the old stuff played by people that were that were ostensibly Gong. So that's what you're getting, and on top of that, this not going to go on forever. We started this band when I joined. I was already middle aged, and I was one of the youngest members. Second youngest in this lineup. So at some point this will be over. We're taking a year off in 27. I don't know what's going to happen after that. And I'm just I look at this. I look at what we've done, and we've put ourselves completely into it. And I hope that, when people talk about Gong, I know really when people talk about Gong, what people talk about is the trilogy. That's the original trilogy. That's what really landed culturally. That's, I think, what created the sound. And
the mythology, maybe.
And the mythology, yeah. So they don't generally, unless they've just come on board, they don't generally talk about bright spirits or unending ascending or whatever. But I hope, if the history books or the history whatevers get written, content gets written about this, I hope that we put in this lovely coda. I hope that the chapter has this lovely coda that, do you know what? Afterwards, there's this transitional album, there's a transitional album, I See You, which kind of establishes this new band. And then there's this, like, the tail of the comet, this pretty tail of the comet, which has its own little, it stands alone, has its own little story. The way that, the Pierre Merlin, Gazos and Downwind and Express, the way that has its own thing. I hope that's what
I think it does. And I got to see you guys play, and that fabulous concert in Allentown that I had the honor to open for you guys, and you guys crushed. It was just astounding. I wanted to show you this poster because I have like a little souvenir. Do you remember this?
I remember that because I'm into comics looking stuff, and I remember
it's really cool. And
I love it because it's really ungongish, but
it's very ungong.
It's like comics looking shit, which I love.
Yeah, it's really fun, and that night was just so much fun to meet you guys, and I felt like we all bonded. And
Oh, it's
And then
lovely.
to witness you guys in that big church, it was astounding. Full production, and people were standing in the pews dancing. It was great. And
Yeah,
so, all that to say is, I think your band is killing. It's just
thank you.
crushing, and
Yeah,
it's the real deal. So
I
it's
mean,
part
you
of the
know,
legacy.
but that's very kind, and I will say, name aside, the name on the door aside. I've been playing in bands. Well, I've been playing in bands since I was like 10 years old, but I've been playing in bands and touring and stuff since I was like 16. And over the years, I've been in lots of different bands, and they're great. But when there's a really when a band has a chemistry, when a band has a really sort of special chemistry, it doesn't come along very often. And
That's right.
my first proper band, the Monsoon Bassoon, had that. And I just thought, oh well, because that band split off after about 6 years or something, and I just thought, oh, we'll just do another band and it'll be cool. But of course, yeah, you can get bands of great musicians or whatever, but there's something about the chemistry of when it's right.
I agree totally.
And this is what with this lineup, this is what we found. And it's a really extraordinary band for me. If we take away again, if you take away the name and the legacy and just look with what we ended up with, why it operates so differently, and one of them was we were put together by someone else. So my relationship with those guys, all of them, starts with our musical relationship, and then the friendship grows afterwards. The friendship grows from years on the road together.
Absolutely.
Rooms together. Well, normally in a band, or often in a band, it will be people that you're friends with, and then you get in the band, and then maybe when the hierarchy, because there is a hierarchy, maybe when the hierarchy is established, some people aren't happy with that. Whereas Gong, the hierarchy we already had it, and then the friendship grew out of that, so there's no resentment, and the band works for many reasons because everybody has a role that's not always the musical role. Ian, the sax player, he's the money guy. Now, if I was the money guy, this band would have run aground before the first year, because I just let's stay at really posh hotels. Let's do this. No PDs every day. No. Whereas Ian's just like total, like he wants the band to get paid, and it's the only way you can do things. I'd say yes to any gig, and Ian's like, we're not doing it. We're going to lose money. So. And then Dave deals with all the aspects of like organizing the crew and doing working out who's going to do what, the things I'm just sort of rubbish at. So every one of us, Fabio's like the tech guy, he's, Cheb deals with as well as registering the songs online. He's really very good with the arrangements. And so all of this stuff kind of, I just do the shop dressing, kind of thing. I just get people into the shop. So that's another reason why it all works, is it's a sort of self-managed group. But then
absolutely, everybody has a role.
Everybody has a role. But the other weird thing, which Fabio pointed out, I'd never thought this, is he said, the great thing about this band is it doesn't belong to any of us. We've all inherited it.
Oh, wow.
I think if there was one guy, let's say there was one overhang from an earlier lineup, from like the 80s, whatever, they might feel that they kind of had more, especially with us, they maybe felt that, oh, well, I've got more of a idea of a say, whereas we don't have that. We all respect what the band represents, what the mythology is, and what we feel should be Gong, and we can't sort of it kind of kills any egotism there, because it's not our band.
I get it.
It's David and Ginny's band, so we have to respect that, and I think that's a really interesting thing. We are creating architecture in someone else's universe. With the tools that were, with the data that was left, with the stuff that was left, we are trying to find the bits of whatever that were left and create our own architecture. But it's definitely not our universe. It was an universe that already existed.
Yeah, really well said. If there was a central message that Gong is presenting, what would it be?
Well, now, after that first rehearsal I had with David, we went down to the pub, and we're hanging out with a friend of ours, Yumi Hara, who came down, who you may have heard of. She plays with sort of Chris Cutler and Tim Hodgkinson and John Greaves, that kind of thing. And she used to play with David and Chris Cutler. And she was hanging out, and then David took me outside and said, let's, come on, let's have a smoke. He had this little pipe, smoked some weed and had a chat. And we were sat outside this pub, and he was telling me about Gong and what he saw as being Gong. And he was saying things like, well, man, I can't do this forever. I can't go to, I always want this band to go. And so he was kind of buttering me up. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was just like, oh, yeah. It felt a bit like he was kind of flattering me a bit too much or something. But he took out this piece of paper and said, this is the objectives of Gong. And I wish I'd either taken a photo of it or a copy of it or something. But it was something along the lines of, it must always be moving upwards. It must always feel like it's going upwards. And it must take, in influences from, jazz and world music. It should be open-minded. It should always be positive, and it should be moving upwards, sort of thing. So, for that reason, I know, when I started sort of writing the lyrics and coming up with the sort of artistic direction or whatever, I didn't feel I could take on the Pothead Pixies and the Octave Doctors and the Flying Teapot, because that was David's mythology.
Yeah.
And I think it would be kind of bogus. And also I'm just not good at humor in music. It just doesn't work for me. And I know people some people maybe find the new Gong too serious, but it's like I can't. It would be bollocks be rubbish if I tried to do humor. It's just not me. It doesn't feel right in music. So I knew that David's mythology was his mystical message, and it had come from a psychedelic trip. So it's like, well, I've had plenty of psychedelic trips, and I'm a turned-on guy, and I have my own mysticism. I'm not an atheist, I'm gonna, in as poetic a way as I can, use that as the grounding, my sort of mystical and metaphysical and spiritual, for want of a better word, ideas. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use this as a platform to sing about that stuff. And what was, really good for me is, I think I'd always been kind of self-conscious about talking about that stuff publicly, and I'd sort of I'd allude to it, but I didn't want to. I kind of didn't really want to talk about it. But being in Gong, it's like, well, it kind of forced me to.
Yeah,
and I'm really glad that it did, because I became I became a better performer. I became a better writer. I became much more open, because I've now been, however history views them, I've been in two of the uncoolest bands that people have heard of all time. I've been in Cardiacs and Gong. I mean, they are just extraordinarily uncool. It's not like, it's not like I joined a later version of the Velvet Underground or Sonic Youth or something. It's Cardiacs and Gong, absolutely mortally uncool. Well, great, then I don't have to worry about, not that I ever really did, but I don't have to worry about being aloof or detached. I can just I can inhabit this role, and it's then sort of it's a triangulation. It's finding the middle ground between, well, what of the Gong mythology and what of the Gong way chimes with me? What do I feel the pull of? What do I see myself in? And what don't I see myself in? Well, I see myself in those riffs. I see myself in this kind of the mystical thing. So it kind of amplified that side of me, and I'm really glad that it did.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting. We're talking about these two bands kind of in depth, but in a way, you're being mentored and shaped in a way. At the same time, you also have your solo stuff going. And as you're moving through Gong, at what point does your solo stuff start taking light?
Well, what it was is I was doing the band Knife World, but actually, if we've got 5 minutes, I can talk about why that band ultimately couldn't work. And what I mean, one of the
Sure.
reasons, one of the I wanted to run it, I wanted to do it side by side with Gong, but
Hard.
we'd got this record deal with Inside Out, which was like a big, I think it was the wrong label for us, but it was a
That's a
really
big
big
deal.
deal. It was
Yeah.
a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
I think we were the token weird band. You know, it didn't work with us, so they tried it with Bent Knee, and I don't think it would necessarily work with them either. But we were sort of the token weird band. But Knifewood was an 8-piece band, and it was just the economics were too hard. It was too hard to make that band work. And what would be so heartbreaking would be, you know, you spent all this time on this rehearsal intensive music,
Yeah.
which is a mixture of acoustic and electric instruments, and you know, all this kind of time on the dynamics and the arrangements and everything, and you know, it was a very subtle thing when you got harmony vocals, the woodwind section, you got keyboards, and the guitar doesn't necessarily, it's not like I was like playing chords and the brass or whatever was kind of adding pads or something on top of that. You know, it was arranged in this kind of Henry Cowish, gentle giantish sort of way, which I love, where might be, you know, just to hear my guitar part wouldn't make sense without the horns, you know, doing this thing in the holes and the keys doing that, you know, that sort of thing. But you'd turn up a gig and we couldn't afford to get our own sound person. You'd be at the mercy of a sound person who would stick the kick drum and the bass guitar and the guitar up loud, and it kind of just didn't go across, and it would break my heart that we'd come off stage. I'd come off stage feeling deflated because it's not what I meant, you know. And people go, "Yeah, that was a good gig," you know. But I knew it wasn't what I knew. The sound wasn't right, you know. But also the other thing with an 8-piece band is that everyone in the band was doing other stuff. You know, they're all musicians.
Everybody's busy.
So every time we'd get a gig, sometimes we'd get offered like a really good gig, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, it's amazing!" I'd send the email, "Guys, you know, 11th of August, how are you fixed?" First email back, "Yep, good for me," and then the drummer would be like, "I've got another thing, I can't get out of it," or this, and it would just be sort of crushing. And so, what I loved about doing like the solo stuff is that, "Are you good for a gig on 11th August?" "Yep, it's on," you know.
I know it's easier.
It started like that, but also, what Gong got so full on. And what happened around the time I was doing Gong, not just because of Gong, because I was doing a few other things as well, DJing being one of them, was that at some point I quit my day job and I was able to make a living around 2018, make a living from music. Well, then once I was making a living from music, I could really only do stuff that I was getting paid for. I was very fortunate that stuff was Gong, and the DJing, and but Knife World wasn't a thing I could get paid for. It was every time we did a tour, it was like setting fire to a suitcase full of money. And so I would work. Back in the day, I would work like a madman, and then in order to fund the band. So I just Knife World sort of turned into this kind of my solo stuff, and instead of arranging for a band, I just kind of gave myself this like set of rules, which I've stuck to. I just thought it'd be a fun thing, really. Like do you know that movement in cinema that I think Lars von Trier was one of the originators, Dogma? Do you know about this? That, where they had these like kind of set of rules where all incidental music, all music must only be coming from, if it's being played in the scene, there's no artificial lighting, there's no makeup, it's done kind of as real life. That was the rule. So I gave myself these rules where, okay, no MIDI instruments. I've got to play everything myself, and with the instruments I've just got in my studio sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I made this thing. I mean, I had a couple of tiny guests, but generally that was my rule. And that if I can't play it, well then, or I'll have to simplify the part in order to do it. And then I extended that to, and I'm also going to draw the cover and by hand, and I'm going to do hand letter the lyrics, and everything will be as a result of my work. Just because, not that I know there are better artists than me, there are better recording engineers than me, there are better mixing engineers, better singers, better bass players, but I just wanted these things to be a document of where I was. And I thought, well, I'll make these very autobiographical because I can't be completely autobiographical in Gong because that's not what Gong's about. There's an ego thing. But I can in these, and I saw it like I saw myself more for the solo stuff, more being like an artist, like a comic artist, like a cartoonist, like say I don't know, Chester Brown or Robert Crumb or Daniel Clowes or Jim Woodring, whatever, where you'd be this art, you'd be responsible for everything, the lettering, the story, the plotting, and I love that. I love that for these periods in my life. I'll hunker down into solo mode, and it really, really kind of what's the word? Not refreshes. It challenges every aspect of me. It challenges me as a writer. It challenges me as a lyricist, as an arranger, a performer, an engineer, an artist, and as a producer. All of that. And then when you mix, you have to get into a different head state to the composer. The composer has to shut the F up because you'll be doing it. And as the composer, I'll come up with all these ideas that play all at once. Oh, aren't I clever? The way that this part fits over that. But you come to mix it and it's too dense and you go, actually, gone. What if I get rid of that? But then the picture emerges and you can't have the composer go, yeah, but that bit really worked well that way, because the mix engineers go, shut up, this sounds better, So I love that. I love
it's
that.
So true.
Yeah, but you have to, because otherwise you'll still be mixing that first album, trying to make that glockenspiel part fit in behind a vocal, even though it's absolutely clashing with you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do. I love hearing this. But it's the sphere of creativity that I love, and you know this too, that I'm a painter and I do my album covers too. So I really love that about what you do, and I love your album covers that you've illustrated. They're gorgeous, I think.
Thank you.
And there's so many aspects of this I want to talk about, because I know it's kind of like a big sidebar that's going on here. Your art, the fact that the art and music together, what does that all mean to you? It's like, I think for me, as growing up with albums my whole life, we had an art collection with our vinyl covers,
absolutely,
and we spent so much time with them that they influenced us both probably photographically as well as illustratively, or, in other ways like painting or hand lettering, all these things that we saw in our record collections, and now that's all coming out, and we have to do everything now, and it's a beautiful thing to be challenged in that way. I don't know if you'd want to talk about that kind of.
No, I'd love to, yeah. Because I used to, I used to think if I couldn't be a pop star, I'd want to be a comic artist. That was my thing. And but then around 16, I had bands throughout school, and I used to make little comics and stuff as well. But
nice.
Around 16, I joined my first sort of proper band, with older kids, which became Die Laughing, and we did gigs around, and we had a van, and it's really exciting. And then then it became, well, this is, I put all my energy into that. And at first, and we're talking about sort of 1988, 1989. 1990. At first, I used to hand do all the covers. Used to do photocopy. You draw it, photocopy it. Do the lettering. What I used to do is I used to have this little electronic typewriter. You type out, Thursday the 12th of April, the Cooperage, Plymouth, and then you take that to a photocopier and blow it up, then cut it out, stick that over the drawing, and then you Tipex out. You get those the punk lines, which the punks love, fanzine lines, where you see them. But I want it to be as pro as possible. You Tipex them out, and that's how you'd make your posters. But then, come 1990, people had computers. I think the first program I remember using was called Corel Draw,
right.
And I could make a logo for my band within 3 minutes, rather than spending kind of like 2 days penciling and measuring. And from that point onwards, you think the computers are doing a better job, but of course I didn't reconnect with drawing until my mid-40s.
Okay. Wow.
And I doodle and stuff, and I did do a little comic strip in the 90s of a Monsoon Bassoon song and all this, but just for fun, I didn't really reconnect properly with drawing, and I found that my style was kind of at the same standard as it was when I let it go in my teens, but I think my taste was better now. I think I had better taste.
Yeah.
And I've never been good with color. Even when I did art, I was not good with paint. Just can't, for whatever reason. I think I'm a little colorblind as well, but I'm just not good with color. And I always responded to pen and ink stuff. I mean, 2000 AD, black and white comics, the American Jaime Hernandez, all that, again, Arkrum, Brian Talbot. I love pen and ink. I love all the shading and everything. It's just got it's got a chart, it's got a magic to it. And I'm not trying to become an all-round artist or a graphic designer. I just know that my favorite stuff is doing pen and ink. So it's like, well, I'll never get to master it, but I'm good. This will be my form. I will back this horse, and I'll just try and get, just try and work on the pen and ink stuff and get that further in. I will never be Gustave Doré. You see that stuff, and you go, well, I'll never be that good. But that's what I'll I'll point the craft of the ship towards Gustave Doré and see where I end up, kind of thing. Or Virgil Finlay being the other one, because I love that pointillistic stuff. And because I'm not doing these drawings to order or for a commission, I can spend ages. You spend days doing these dots, which you'd never do if you were doing a comic, because you would just.
That's right.
Yeah. So
it's also time intensive.
Yeah, it's time intensive, but it's time I love. I love doing it. I listen to
the process of it, right?
I love the process. And this ties in with the AI thing and everything. I love the process of doing it, and that's really the thing. It's not the end result. And as I work on stuff, you start coming up with theories about what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And I realized that, art or creativity, whatever you want to call it, it's a dialogue with yourself. Playing an instrument is a dialogue with yourself, and your shortcomings and the corrections of your shortcomings and how much you put into it. It's a dialogue with a otherwise unreachable part of yourself. And I find I found out more and more about the way I think, the way my mind works.
Absolutely.
And through drawing, I started to see similarities. And you must have this. You must have it, because I think everybody who does the multidiscipline does. I started seeing how my drawings were like my music.
Absolutely.
And how my approach to drawing was the same as my approach to music.
Yeah, you get certain insights. I think when I'm painting, I get insights about music, and when I'm playing music, I get insights about painting, and I think they cross over.
Yeah, and I think there's a similarity in that I wrote this sort of memoir with Steve Davis, Medical Grade Music, and it's the first time I've really written big chunks seriously. I'd written reviews and short stories myself, but it's the first time I really seriously wrote. And I realized the same thing. The same thing is true with writing and drawing and making music, and doubtless filmmaking. Or it becomes like you have the initial idea, but the rest of it is a process of organization. But then you realize, now I'm organizing. No, that works better. Now I'd write a paragraph, and it was all right, and then I take the point out and put it earlier in the paragraph, and suddenly something else becomes almost like not the punchline, but something else, because that the paragraph works much better with that at the end. Even though,
I love that.
That kind of thing. And
yeah,
same with drawing. As you're drawing, you're coming up with more ideas as you go along, and it's a process of like organization. And it's that initial spark puts the pen to the paper, or puts the guitar around your neck, or the microphone in front of you. But then, as you're doing it, you get deeper into it, and you find out more about what the thing you're making is. as you're doing it. I truly don't believe that any filmmaker. Well, no, I don't say I don't believe. Maybe some do, but I don't. You can have a general idea, or at least I have a general idea about what I want the thing to do.
You have the storyboard, maybe.
Yeah, but in the journey, you discover far more things as you're going along, and you start to see synchronicities. You start to as you're observing, you start noticing synchronicities. Oh, look, this works with. Oh, this ties into. Oh, this, and then you follow them. And in a way, I don't want to be too tied to that original idea. The original idea just gets you in the vehicle and starts up the engine. You know,
exactly.
After that, wherever it takes you, let's go there. Oh, the steering wheel's dragging me that way. Okay, I'll go that way and see what's over there. You know,
that's the best way.
Yeah, I think.
You know, if you hang on to the initial idea and try to force it through, you can't force things.
No, and I think it's like that whole demoitis kind of thing when you read is that you're always disappointed because you never really get there. You know, you I did that once. I had a Knife World album called The Unraveling, and I really knew I had written notes about what I wanted, and I had this conceptual idea behind it, and I kind of got there, I think, but it was agony getting there because I was trying to stick to this. No, this is what it's got to be, sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you talked a little bit about the importance of art and music in a way encapsulated, because, you know, we are in this age of AI where, you know, literally you can't get on the phone and talk to someone at a bank or anything. Like if you just want to ask a question, you get an AI person now.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it. But then we have people, you know, creative writers who their jobs are being, you know, maligned by AI doing the writing. In seconds. And you're talking about the importance of the process is what it is all about.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. That's where, you know, that's where people are missing out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
By not taking on art in their lives, or writing or painting or sculpting or making a film. And you were also just now talking about making a film where, you know, maybe there is a storyboard, but by the end, at the editing suite is where the film actually comes together.
Yeah.
It's like we start moving these bits around,
and as we were saying, with mixing, you know, the editor has to be. If you're editing your own stuff, the editor has to be very different to the scriptwriter and the director.
Yeah,
because you might really love this scene because but the editor's like, nah, it's not working. It slows the film down. You know, and you've got to be brutal. You know.
Yeah. So how do you self-edit? How do you do that?
I don't know. I mean, you just do, don't you?
You try things.
You just do. You feel it. I think
you feel it.
You just feel it. Yeah. You know, and sometimes it's like anything, you know, like ending a relationship or ending a band or just any of these things where actually I shouldn't talk negatively or whatever, but you know when it's like, I've got this, you know, you know it in yourself, and you can give yourself excuses, and sometimes it'll be a few days of, I've got to keep this bit. I tell you what I do when I cut out a whole section of a song, which I will do often. There'll be a whole bit of a song where I'm going, this is getting in the way, and I get rid of it. And what I always do, I always say, well, I'll save this version, and I'll create, you know, whatever the song is, version 4. And if I change my mind, I'll go back. And since 2009, I have never once gone back. It's all because you know it's got to, you know.
I love that. Yeah.
But somewhere, if I go back over the old files, I'll find these whole bits in songs that I'd totally forgotten about. But, you know, I just want to say as an aside, it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I had a bit of a meltdown at Bristol Airport going on to Barcelona because I had to download an app to get to check in, and I get so stressed. It's like doing exams. I hate the way of living now. I hate this way of living. I hate this having to have an app. I hate having to, you know, you have to have an app to order. I remember being at an airport and like, you know, the bar was there. The bar was like as far away as this, you know, the wall in front of me was. And I was there and I could see the beer that I wanted. And I wanted a beer and I had to scan this thing and no, you have to order. I hate this way of living. You know what? Who does it benefit? It's horrible, horrible. Nobody's into it. I don't like it. And for me, I get, my heartbeat starts going when I have to interface with these apps, and I'm scared I'm going to get the wrong answer, and it never works, and it's awful. I would love to throw the damn thing away. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've just bought myself a granny phone. You can still stick the SIM card in it, and it's a granny phone. It only does text, and it's like, maybe that's me, But
Yeah.
It's a horrible way of living we have now. It's really, this thing. It hasn't improved stuff.
It's a great new business model. Back to
great to sing. Great to sing.
Humanity.
Great to sing like horn arrangements into, though.
No, it's the thing that I do love about it is I have a camera in my pocket and a video thing at all times, and we have our notes and stuff like that. But everything else is a distraction and pulls you away from what we should be doing, right?
Yeah, man. Anyway, that was the aside. Yeah.
It was a great aside, and
I hate this way of living, but yeah,
the writing process thing is just always fascinating to me, And so the other day I was down here and I just got a new effect pedal, which maybe we'll talk about your effect pedals and stuff. Yeah. But I was just messing around, and whenever you get a new pedal, one of the things I love to do is set the laptop in record, and then I just mess around because I don't know what I'm doing yet. And the next thing I know, I have 20 minutes of music, and I can't stop.
That's one side of the next album. Yeah.
I can't stop listening to it because it's like I'm not really trying to do anything. I'm messing about, and what the result was so much fun. So there's something in that. There really is something in that about not trying to make something sometimes, and just drifting through it or turning the brain off.
Well, this has been for me that band, the Utopia Strong, which is all improvised, and it's 2 modular synths, and I play harmonium, guitar through lots of effects, bass. This is live anyway, and little synth, and then just woodwinds and some percussion, and it's all improvised, and we are trying to compose in real time, and I
love that.
We're not going down that. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but there is a sort of inverted commas around the thing, that the kind of improvised music vibe,
right.
And I remember Tim Smith pointing out that he said, the big cliche in improvise, when you go and see an improvised thing, the big cliche is when the drummer goes. Yeah, he says, the minute that happened, I'm out. It's like, and now I'm really aware of it. It's like, so, but it's not like that. We're trying to create this extremely transformative, psychedelic, multi-layered, celestial, beautiful music, together, and every night is different, and we'll deliberately give ourselves, we'll have a key that we start off in, just to change things up, because every key's different, especially from the woodwind perspective. Mike plays pipes, and some keys don't work for instruments, and other keys I'm not as fluid on. I don't know my notes, so we'll go out and beforehand let's do D minor, and we'll just start off in D minor and see where we end up, or let's go C whole tone. That's one of my favorites, C whole tone, and then I know where I am with the whole tone scale, and that's how that's our model. And then for the studio recordings, we do the same thing, and we record everything in stems, and then we listen back, and we might go, there's something here, and so we'll take that 6-minute section. And then we'll start editing, getting rid of stuff, and then we decorate the improvisation. We will decorate so we'll put on some Fender Rhodes.
Yes.
We'll add on some acoustic guitar. Steve will put some more weird synth textures, whatever. I might do some strange vocals, but it starts off with an improvisation. So it's surprising to us. And what I love is that I've got my own kind of melodic and harmonic world that I like to work in. Certainly with Gong and my solo stuff, I'm terrible for the Lydian mode. It kills me. I love it, Whereas in Utopia Strong, Steve might come up with something, and I'm responding to that, and the Lydian mode won't work over this bizarre dissonant E minor he's doing. So it kind of forces me to find interesting lines in a mode that I wouldn't normally use, you know, and so it's always surprising, you know, and that's been amazing. And actually doing that band has changed the way I do Gong and my solo stuff, because I came from a world. Cardiacs is a great example, actually. Cardiacs is this rehearsal intensive music with no improvisation. Rehearsal intensive music that is constantly modulating. You know, it rarely stays in one key for more than 2 or 3 seconds. The way Tim wrote is always modulating these majors and minors, and it's very, very rehearsal intensive. And that's the world I knew. My band, the Monsoon Bassoon, was this same thing. And then Knife World was that, and I just thought that's who I was. That's who I am. I write this very information dense, rehearsal intensive, modulating, complex, sort of polyrhythmic music, and you almost feel like, well, that's what I do. That's the person I am. But the Utopia Strong, conversely, will be in the same key for 20 minutes, and because that's the nature of modular synthesis. But I still have that part of me that wants, all the while being in the same key and playing ostensibly something minimal, I still want it to be as stimulating and to fire off my my neurons or whatever, my play. I still want this music to hit me on all the same pleasure centers.
Absolutely.
Something like Cardiacs did. Well, how can I make, which is the opposite, it's non-modulating improvised music as opposed to constantly modulating composed music. Well, how can I still make this music as exciting to me as that was in this idiom? And because of doing that, it's almost like I've slowed the car down or something, and now I'm looking at the landscape going past much slower, but there's more to see in the landscape now that it's not zooming past.
Absolutely.
And so I've found a new way of working, and it's allowed me to not have to always feel like I need to change key. It's allowed me to write stuff that doesn't change key, not always, and not necessarily often, but it's really impacted on the way I write in Gong and the way I write in my own stuff. And I didn't see that coming. And that came as a result of just the three of us playing together. We didn't have an idea for the band. It's just like, well, what will happen if the three of us have a jam? And then we decided to record it. And then Utopia Strong was born.
I totally agree. Once you get into improvisation and improvising group or improvising by yourself, it changes everything. Before, like thinking more compositionally, you still will think compositionally, or the composition will show up during the improv sometimes, and most of the time. But, all of the bands that I've pretty much had and still do, including Pact with Percy and Orion Tango, they're all improvising bands, and that's what turns me on now as well, and it has for a long time. And you get a lot of insight because if we were listening to jazz or ECM records or stuff or early Miles, you'd be like, how does he know how to do that? Why is he playing those notes? And you realize, they're improvising. This is coming out of them right now. And also in terms of keys and trying to make scales fit, you realize that you just listen, and you find it, right?
Yeah, absolutely that. And I love it when something's going on, because we've just come from a 16-date Utopia Strong tour. And I think we're playing better now. We started this group in 2018, and now we've got nearly a couple of 100 gigs under our belt. And there's just moments where what is happening is so beautiful. And I've got my little setup. I've got my harmonium, we make loops and stuff. But what's happening is so beautiful that I'll stand back, maybe put my arm on the harmonium and listen, and just think, I'm not going to play until I hear what I need to play. Because I'd always be tempted to, to try and fill the gap. Oh, I better pick up some glissando guitar here now. But I'm just going to listen to what these guys are doing. And sometimes there'll be like 2 or 3 minutes will pass. It's like, I got nothing. And then I'll just hear something, and I think I can hear a bass line now. And I pick up the bass and just tentatively put in, one note on the 2 or something. bomb, and so I'm good for 10 minutes now. This is adding to it, and I love it. I love doing that, and it's really retrained me. And another thing is that cardiacs and that world that I came from, the world of cardiacs, is so intoxicating, and it's so much, it draws such a sort of intense and loyal and kind of committed fan base that I think if you're working in that idiom, you're always going to be number two. You'll never be number one, because Tim was a genius, and so it was the Utopia Strong, and subsequently my own stuff has been a way for me to find my thing away from that.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're always going to be there. And I don't think there's not that much of a that much of an overlap between Cardiacs fans and people who love the Utopia Strong. And I love that people have come to the Utopia Strong because it's our thing and this is what we do. And 6-7 years in, people are starting to get it. We're playing in churches now. I mean, in fact, the venue we played together, and that's more like kind of the places we play now.
That's awesome.
Because it sounds great. You play to that reverb, in the room.
And you sing in Utopia Strong too?
Well, what I do, I will sing through a huge. I've got talking about pedals, a big Eventide space. I sing through this huge cavernous reverb, and I'll often make loops. So I'll just create loops, and then I've got this ditto, so I can speed up the loops or slow them down. I can bring them in. You'll create this choir, perhaps. So it's just very abstract. I might create a choir, and then that's an option. If we're in E minor, say I've got this choir that fits in this E minor, and then as the tune goes along, as what we're doing goes along, I'll fade that out on a volume pedal, and maybe I'll put it on double speed on my ditto. And later on in the tune will be somewhere, and then I'll bring in this choir, but it's all these angelic, weird high voices through the reverb. So I just throughout the first 10 minutes or 5 minutes of a piece, you're creating these palettes, which on top of the actual live playing, you can refer to. They become you create these textures which can then be accessed. I'll do some harmonium.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's really exciting. And hearing it back as well, we have this great we've created this great model where we make these studio albums for our label Rocket, where we do these decorated improvisations, but we record every show just on a Zoom, just a stereo recording. And Steve, who's the I don't want to say the gatekeeper, the
archivist, perhaps.
Thank you, the band archivist. He goes through these recordings, and at 2 a.m. he'll go, guys, Ipswich is next level, and it's like, okay. And so
I love that.
We then have a side hustle where we'll we make these 250 copies hand numbered. I used to do it with lino cut covers, but now I do screen prints of my artwork, and we'll release these as a 250 limited edition.
I love that.
And we get to curate the stuff that we're 100% into. And sometimes we'll splice 2 or 3 gigs together. We'll make collages, but we get to do this kind of these long form pieces where each side is 20 minutes long, and then do the smaller kind of more dense composed-ish pieces for the studio albums. So we're really lucky,
Yeah, that whole process is an amazing thing, and I just love like what you're doing with the limited editions. I do something similar too with CDs and different live gigs where I'll hand paint like a series of 20 maybe, and that's it. And it's really fun to do that.
I love it. I loved it. And going back to when I was doing my first band in Plymouth, what we used to do, we made our first cassette EP, and what we did is you'd photocopy the covers, and the covers would have, I think you could fit like 3 cassette covers on one sheet of paper. And what I would do is I would lay out all the covers on my bedsit, my little apartment, and lay them out on the floor. I had an airbrush, and I would just do swirly psychedelic designs over just swirls, pinks and greens and whatever. and then you cut them up so everyone is individual, you know, and and that was just as a way, because you couldn't afford color printing.
Yeah.
But it just makes them special, you know, because everyone's
Absolutely.
different. And there's sort of, it's almost like I've come back to the aesthetic that I was doing as a teenager, but in my middle age.
It's so important. I love it. And that leads me to the next question, because we keep talking about this lovely term called psychedelic. And do you feel like talking a little bit about that in terms of how it relates to you?
Yeah. Well, it was one of those words that I would see popping up. I would see that word popping up on reviews of things that I liked. You know, generally the stuff I'd like to refer to it is, this is quite psychedelic. So, I love the word. I love the way it pops out on the page. I love seeing that PSYCH. You know, it pops out nicely. It means literally mind revealing, I believe. And you know, obviously, you'd hear all these horror stories about LSD, and they were intriguing. And I got, I got to an age, I turned 16 in 1988. The rave thing was happening, and acid was around a lot, and it was, I suppose, it was a kind of rite of passage that people were doing acid, and at some point, me and my girlfriend thought, let's do some acid, and I've always been drawn to anything that had, for want of a better word, a supernatural quality. I was like dreams and music.
Yeah.
And I was really obsessed with death and trying to figure out my mortality, and LSD, the experience, certainly once 2 or 3 trips in, the experience had this utterly sort of supernatural quality. But the thing was, it was the way you could hear inside the music. Acid allowed me to hear every little building block of this music. You could see around the other side of the note. You could hear how it was made, and you could also hear, I felt like you could hear the intent inside music. Where on acid, you could almost hear the mind of the artist working. And I could hear some stuff that I liked that on acid I felt that it was like kind of bogus, and other stuff which just kind of like, oh my God, they must have known that people would listen to this tripping kind of thing. But it had such a profound effect. And myself and Dan Chudley and Die Laughing, he was like my trip buddy, and we used to write together. We would take acid and we would write, and we would spend the whole night writing and come out with these arrangements, and then 2 days later go to the band and go, here's the song. And pretty much all of our band, I'd say most of the Monsoon Bassoon stuff was written while we were tripping. We used to see that as being a way of getting we were getting to the source,
Yeah.
And I can still taste metal in my throat when I hear that stuff. But that's how that's kind of how we wrote initially, so it was about having this otherworldly quality, which wasn't about having necessarily having flanges, and it wasn't about Pink Floyd's echoes, as much as I love it. There was for me, there was a quality to it, and like one of our key acid albums, as well as Cardiacs, and Steve Reich Octet was that piece was the ultimate acid for us. But the other one was Naked City's Torture Garden. That to me was like a total acid album, because you got these 20 second genre crossing, like Yamatsuka Eye and so on, and Joey Barron, whatever, but you could just hear inside it, and it was so thrilling. That music
amazing.
Was just even more thrilling when you were on acid, because you could see it coming at you and understand how that worked. And then Wayne Horowitz comes in with that was the kind of stuff we were listening to, rather than
that was an amazing moment.
Grateful Dead, or something.
Yeah.
But that was my way into jazz. Because
that's an interesting way in. Yeah.
And it was an accident. It was because to me, I just didn't have any jazzer friends. It wasn't cool, and I just thought it was mucking about.
And it was non-typical jazz, really.
Yeah. But that was my funny way in, and what it was is that I used to collect records on a British record label called Earache, and that was the band that did all that extreme metal stuff. So it was like Carcass, Napalm Death, Bolt Thrower, Morbid Angel, Hell Bastard, Godflesh. And I love that stuff. I mean, I think, that was the extreme metal stuff in the 80s was really exciting. And they put out Torture Garden by John Zorn's Naked City. Now, I'd heard of Fred Frith, who was on it, but I didn't know anything about it. And I heard this thing, and it was like, well, initially it was like, but this is like beyond Cardiacs. It's kind of more spastic than Cardiacs even. It was, and it was amazing. And of course, I've probably still got a bit of that about me, but not nearly as I used to. But I love that some people hated it. It was like that first Melvins album, Gluey Porch Treatments. I remember getting people around. I remember playing it to a friend when we were tripping, and he could not handle Gluey Porch Treatments. He's like, turn this off. And of course, it's like Tramp Mask Replica, another one, great acid album, another great acid album. But I loved anything that kind of like felt like it was, like you I don't know, you had to sort of, I don't know. It took some getting into. I just loved that, And Torture Garden was that. And so then I sort of sought out anything that had those guys on it. So anything with Joey Barron on it, anything with Brill Frisell on it, I'd then get that. And I remember getting this like John Schofield and Bill Frisell, this Bass Desires thing.
Oh, that's a great record.
It's great. Yeah, I love it, right? And that's where I first
heard band.
Part 2 of Love Supreme. So then I was like, then Coltrane, and then, and that's kind of how it opened up. That's what gave me my jazz ears, finally. Not that I really have jazz ears, but, it kind of opened up that world. But I kind of, my jazz, I think, is more rock guys jazz, because the ones I did, Miles Davis, Sun Ra, John Coltrane, Alice Coltrane,
sure,
Thelonious Monk, but that's kind of rock. I think that's kind of rock guy jazz, right? I mean, I'm not a jazz. I
love that. I've never heard that
rock
term.
Guys like that, I mean, it's just
the rock guy point of view.
That's kind of like rock guys get that. I mean, as a rock guy, I got Sun Ra, I think maybe that's
just amazing. You just that catalog is so massive, and it doesn't matter what record you put on. You're like, wow, right? Yeah. And I think that we're talking about an even larger expanse than psychedelia. Really, it's like what are we getting into? Really, like when you're thinking of a Love Supreme or something like that. What are we talking about? Are we talking about sacred music, spiritual music, universal music? Because I think psychedelia might take us into that area, right?
Yeah. What I loved about psychedelia is that it could borrow from, or it could take from mystical Eastern texts. It could take from Indian music using the Lydian mode and sitars, but also harpsichords. It could take like hypnotic. It could just take from anywhere. It would just steal, and it would meld it into this thing that was beautiful and colorful and expansive and delirious and unexpected. I love that, how unexpected it was. And for me, all my favorite music is psychedelic. It's Stravinsky is psychedelic. Debussy is. I mean, that's where it starts for me. Debussy is Debussy is psychedelic. The Melvins is psychedelic. So that was really like My Bloody Valentine is psychedelic. It wasn't about the 60s kind of scene and that thing and those instruments. It was just the approach. I think the approach of to make something that was transformative and celestial, and
there it is,
and was aiming high. Was really aiming high. And I remember saying, and I'm not an atheist anymore, but I remember thinking about Magma. I was a huge Magma fan, and there's something so sort of religious about that music, particularly because of the choral aspect.
Absolutely.
And you sort of felt like, I remember seeing them one time, because myself and my ex-wife were obsessed with Magma, and we used to go and see them at every available opportunity.
Sure.
Go to France and watch them, and whenever they played in France, we'd go. We didn't have much money, but we'd drive over and camp in a tent in a campsite nearby and drive in and watch them. And we were lucky to see them throughout the 2000s, which I think was their strongest lineup, even against the 70s stuff. I thought Philippe Boussonet and James McGowan, with them and Stella, that was just at the core of it. Just for me, the best bass player ever, Philippe Boussonet, and James McGowan, who was a friend of mine,
Wow.
He was incredible. But I remember thinking, God, if you believed in God, this would be the music. This would be the music you presented to him. Not all things bright and beautiful. You would present this extraordinarily rich and complex and multi-layered and polyrhythmic. This is the true music of the star. This is the celestial music. It's this incredible stuff. I mean, that was really psychedelic to me. And that was like the ultimate psychedelic music and transformative. I mean, seeing Magma and watching Christian von Der play. I remember seeing them at the Triton in whatever year it was they did that kind of myths and legends thing where they played the lot. And I remember for one of the shows being sat at the front row. The Triton's a tiny little. Have you ever played there in Paris? The Triton.
What's it called?
The Triton, like your Tritone actually earlier. The Triton just outside.
I don't think I have. Tiny
little place. I think it maybe seats. I don't know what it is. It's seated. It's a tiny place with a beautiful kind of sounding room. And PA.
Wow.
I remember being for one of the performances, being in the front row and seeing them perform KA and thinking, no matter what is going on this planet right now, no matter what extraordinary things are happening on planet Earth in this moment, nothing is more magical or better than what I am experiencing right now.
Yeah.
So there cannot be anything better happening.
I saw them in Philly. I don't know when it was now. Whenever the last time they played the States, which it must have been within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And just feeling like, what is this music? Because I didn't have all of their albums. I had a few of their records.
I don't think you need to.
And I was so blown out. And Christian, at one point in the show, sang a John Coltrane saxophone solo.
Oh, yeah. And he does his... I love it. I love it when he does that. Yeah.
So he loved Coltrane.
Oh God, yeah. He saw the whole thing as his tribute to John Coltrane. And what he would do on the drums. I mean, he just seemed to be able to do things with rhythm that I'd never heard any other drummer do. It was as if he could compress or expand time itself. The very nature of time would change. And because of the polyrhythmic nature of Magma, you'll have the bass playing in 1 meter, then you have the keys playing in another meter, then you will have the voices playing in another meter, and you might have the guitar playing another meter again. But Christian, who's written it all, he is able to shift between every night different.
Exactly.
He never did the same thing twice. He knows where the 1 is of that 5. He knows where the 1 is of that 7. He knows where the 1 is of that 13, and he's shifting between all of them. 1 minute he's with the vocals, he's pushing that, then he's back with the bass, and he's.
I know, I love that,
and I love that he's so loose. It's not this kind of, he's not this rigid like everything in a grid.
No, he's a jazz drummer,
shifting loose. Oh man,
the question still remains: why do we do it, and what kind of advice would you give to people that are still trying to do that? In these days and times of AI, and we kind of touched on that a little bit, but the advice part is the point, I think.
Well, I think it's probably nothing that no one hasn't given hundreds of times. I mean, what was it, Van Dyke? I mean, I think I'm quoting Van Dyke Parks, but he says, do your thing, do it well, and don't be doing what anyone else is doing.
There it is.
That's it. But I think if I was going to give advice to my younger self, it would be don't be self-conscious about taking yourself seriously or else being sincere. I think there's a part of you, the inner critic, can talk yourself down from stuff.
Yeah,
and it's taken me a long time to really be able to go, no, sod it. No, I'm gonna do this. Mm-hmm. But I think also follow that which. You do feel a pull. If you come to a crossroad, You
Yeah.
kind of feel which one is left and right. And a great thing to do is, if you do need a choice, is flip a coin. Not because you should necessarily pick heads or tails, but if you're leaning towards one and you pick heads and tails and you get something, you feel a moment of disappointment. It's like, well, then you should have done the other one. Do the other one. It's just a way of clarifying. What. But no, I mean, you do feel a pull of something. With an idea, with the same thing as talking about like cutting out a section of a song. You kind of know that bit isn't working, and listen to that voice. If you're asked to do something and red flags are coming up, don't do that thing. If you're asked to work with someone or asked to do a project that doesn't kind of feel right to you, but maybe it's got this and that, don't do it. And
Yeah, I hear that.
And get a day job. Make sure you've got a day job. Absolutely, because you don't want want artistic decisions to be made on whether you're going to eat that week or not. I think.
To take certain gigs or whatever.
Yeah, I think make sure you got a day job and spend all your time doing it. I mean, if you're into it, then it's not work. I mean, I don't know if you get this, but people say, "Oh, why don't you say you need to take a break?" I think, well, break from what? Why do I need a break? What am I going to do? I read comics. I read a comic for half a day. Don't want to make a comic. It's like if you're into it, then you're into it. You're a lifer, and I kind of knew I was a lifer, and I thought that all the people around me were as well.
Yeah,
and and the trouble is with being a lifer, it comes with heartbreak. I've got such a I've got kind of real tragedies in my life and things that like regular folks did that I just really screwed up at. Having a family and that kind of thing. It was like I really it just didn't work out because at the end you're doing your you follow the art and that does make you really selfish.
You follow your heart.
Yeah. You kind of got to be selfish. I think that's the awful thing. That is the awful tragedy of it. You've got to be selfish. You follow it because if you don't, well then what's the point? What's the point in any of it? And it's a horrible lesson in a way.
It's finding that balance, I guess.
Yeah.
If there is a balance,
Yeah.
But we have to take breaks from it. We, like walks in nature and places that take us away from the work. But then it's totally stimulating us for the next go round all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, we talked about a lot of stuff today.
I was worried we would repeat, but we went somewhere completely different, I think.
You cannot force it.
Yeah, yeah.
And we hit on some things that were just amazing. And, I don't know, maybe at some point we'll have a part 2 because I know you have a solo album coming out. We didn't talk really too much about your solo stuff, but maybe that's for the next time upon the release. We can talk about that.
That would be great.
And as always, such a great hang, man.
Well, I loved it, Tim. I really loved it. Thank you.
And
I spend all this time theorizing and coming up with these ideas about this stuff. It's nice to be able to share it, and just go, oh, right. Oh, yeah. I'm not the only one who thinks this way,
Yeah. And I feel like at some point we might have to send each other files.
Oh, 27 is a good year for that. I'm taking a break from like GONG and relentless touring. So 27 is my year for finally getting to do that stuff. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I love doing that. It's a great way of working. Yeah. I did that recently with a composer called Richard Wildman, and I'm very happy with the results. So I'd love to do that. Yeah.
I mean, unless I can get over to England sometime and we can hang, which would also be fun. Any plans on coming back to the US?
Let's see. It's it's an expense thing. It comes down to the visas. But I'd love to come and perform solo over there as well. But which would be a lot cheaper. But let's see. All
right. Well, Kavus, thank you so much again. And
thanks, man.
Tim Motzer signing off, Searching for Sparks. Thank you so much.
Lots of love. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.